transfer window has closed on one of the most dramatic January deadline days in Premier League history. The top flight has now concluded their business for the winter as they look to achieve their goals for the second half of the season. But what teams did well in the transfer market and what teams didn't? Let's take a look. Starting off with number 20, Everton. It's a desperate time to be in Everton time, even after that win over Arsenal. Joint bottom of the league at the time of the deadline. I'm watching every club strengthen. Frank Lampard sacked as manager early after overseeing 9 losses in 12, but Sean Dyche has come in and gave Everton no new signings, and Anthony Gordon jumped ship, but at least they got that win over Arsenal, which should give everyone a boost. But moving on then to Liverpool, in solidarity with their Merseyside rivals, the Reds also had a baffling window in which they ignored a glaring hole in their team. The 37 million capture of Cody Gakpo at the start was seen as a coup, but Liverpool fans haven't been quite so pleased with the future arrivals, which was 0. They needed a new midfielder. They didn't get one. 0 goals or assists so far from Gakpo. Klopp admitted he only needed a new midfielder in August, and Arthur Melo has done nothing. So Liverpool needed to strengthen in that area. But moving on into number 18, that's Man City. Guardiola rarely makes big signings in the winter market, not that the City boss needed to. A drop in their usually high standards this term, however, 5 points behind Arsenal at time of recording may have led to some belief he would spend. They did beat Wolves and Newcastle to the signing of Maximo Perron, but allowing star man João Cancelo to go without a direct replacement, it just seems like a downgrade, and they could potentially be light in that position as well, with so many fronts. Strengthening their UCL rival as well is baffling. But moving on into Brentford in 17th, it's telling the highest profile signing was the arrival of David Beckham's son Romeo on loan to their B side from Inter Miami. The B's terrific campaign, in which they find themselves up in 8th, means not much would have been needed to add. Freiburg forward Shande brought in an initial loan ahead of a club record 20 million permanent move. All the talk is for Romeo Beckham, will Shande be able to provide cover for Tony, whose future is unclear? Who knows? Well, I guess we'll have to see. But they failed to tie down David Raya to a long-term contract, and Dead Spence went to Rams instead of them. So slightly disappointing for them. In 16th, we've got Aston Villa. Unai Emery has seen an upturn in results since succeeding Steven Gerrard, but Villa have one eye in the teams below them. Attacking-minded defender Moreno was brought in early on, but a number of other targets slipped through the fingers, such as Sarg and Dowsey, and Danny Ings switched to West Ham has put pressure on some youngsters to play up front should Ollie Watkins suffer an injury. So that could be a concern, and maybe you could see them slip into relegation zone. Unlikely, but possible, I suppose. But in 15th, I've gone for Palace. Patrick Vieira called on the clubs to start back in with signings, just perhaps not the ones he wanted. They wanted to bring Aaron Wan-Bissaka back, but didn't want to meet Manchester United's asking price. Conor Gallagher also, but that didn't happen. Nahome Ahmeda arrived alongside Lokonga from Arsenal to add to Vieira's unhappiness. Wilfred Zaha's out for a while with a hamstring injury, Alanga deal fell flat. So Palace could have trouble replacing him. But in 14th, then moving on, I've got West Ham. The Hammers were in a unique situation in January, having been one of the biggest senders in the summer by splashing 170 million on 8 players. But for one reason or another, it just hasn't clicked for David Moyes' men so far. Danny Ings could be a shrewd acquisition, but he suffered an injury minutes into his debut. They did manage to avoid Mikel Antonio following Craig Dawson out the exit door though, which could be good. But they still look good at fullback. But Mikel Antonio with Danny Ings going off injured, it was crucial to keep him around, I suppose. In 13th, I got Fulham. Fulham are another club that didn't need a busy transfer window, sitting in the top half for an incredible season so far. But boss Marco Silva would have benefited from further depth in central midfield, with only Sasa Lukic arriving from Torino. A proposed move for Sheffield United Sander Birch failed to come to fruition, and back up if Alexander Mitrovic goes injured, is still in short supply. Silva, who did reunite with Cedric from Arsenal, was a good deal for them, and Jack went for it at the last minute. In 12th, I've gone for Newcastle. The Magpies are expected to be a major player in every transfer window since their big money takeover, but Eddie Howe is choosing to be much more restrained in January, choosing instead Trent Edwards from his bulging squad. Chris Wood was allowed to leave, and as was John Joe Selby to Nottingham Forest. A significant 45 million was parted with to bring Anthony Gordon to Everton, while nabbing West Ham Salah Ashby was a coup. However, Newcastle failed to replace Shelby, and dream top target James Maddison stayed put, but potentially that could be one for the summer. In 11th, I've gone for Manchester United. The Red Devils' start and end to the January transfer window was done in decisive fashion, with the cancelling of Cristiano Ronaldo's contract making world headlines. With any long-term solutions to United striker issues having to wait until the summer, the club did at least move to add Wout Weghorst as a stopgap. Jack Butland was signed in similar fashion as goalkeeper cover, while Wan-Bissaka stayed despite speculation. But perhaps the most impressive part came right at the end, with signing Sabitzer on loan after Eriksen's injury came clear. Good decisive business from United. In 10th, I've gone for Brighton. It's a mark of how good the CEO's scouting department is that the rivals of two teenage midfielders, Yassin Ayari and Fernando Brunet, have already become players worth keeping an eye on. In truth, the club's transfer window can be summed up as a success overall. Keeping Moises Caicedo haven't been backed into a corner and allowing Trossard to leave, and Brighton ensured Caicedo would not follow suit despite his desire to. They may regret the decision not to bring in a new forward though, with interest in Vitinha calling following a positive injury update on Evan Ferguson. In 9th, I've gone for Leicester. The Foxes are very much in danger of being the same spot on the list as they are in the Premier League before a flurry of activity, having failed to record a Premier League win since the World Cup by the end of the January transfer break in mid-November. Reinforcements were key. But keeping hold of Maddison and Tielemans was good. Opoku is a long-term investment, and Harry Souttar a big statement on deadline day, while Tete's arrival will free Maddison to be more central. A Doom push to get Leeds winger James Maddison from Leeds, coupled with an inability to shift the likes of Vestergaard and Sancho following Iosi Perez stops Leicester being even higher, however. In 8th, I've gone for Tottenham. Manager Conte has been crying out for a new right wing back, as evidenced by Matt Doherty and Jed Spence both leaving on deadline day. Sporting Lisbon's Pedro Porro, whose loan deal was announced minutes before the deadline, finally looks to be a solution. Yet none of the other problem areas in the squad seem to be addressed, with a goalkeeper to challenge Hugo Lloris, a central defender for Romero, a creative midfielder since Eriksen left, not done. Although Tottenham are so often on the wrong of hijackings, they did manage to get Danjuma, and he could prove to be useful with Son and Richarlison misfiring. But moving on into 7th, and that's Wolves. Jolly and Lopetegui wasted little time in identifying a weakness in their squad, and they did some decent signings with the captures of Mateus Cunha and Pablo Sobraya from Atletico Madrid and PSG respectively. Dawson has the leadership and experience to fill the void left by captain Conor Cody in the summer, and the midfield is now packed. João Gomez snubbed a late hijack attempt from Lyon to move to Molineux, while Lamina has returned to English football after spells at Southampton and Fulham. But a failure to recruit out-and-out goal scorer may be an opportunity missed, with Raul Jimenez and Diego Costa not exactly firing this season, I think it's fair to say. In 6th, I've gone for Southampton. They've been crying out for a new frontman for years, with Che Adams flattering to deceive to replace Danny Ings. But the club came through with the capture of £18 million Genk striker Paul Nchinchu, who is the top scorer in the Belgian league. With Southampton's problem area addressed, fans get excited over record signing Salman Arna as the Ghanaian chose St Mary's over Everton. Nathan Jones has already had fresh attacking impetus, with Miroslav Orsic arriving earlier in the window, which could be a shrewd acquisition too. In 5th is Arsenal. Coming into the season, Mikel Arteta may have not planned to invest heavily in January, but his size situation forced his hands. Arsenal flying at the top of the Premier League and seeking reinforcements to help seal a first Premier League in almost 20 years. Cover on the wing, central defence and a holding midfield to ease the burden on Thomas Partey after Elneny's injury were all identified. And in fairness, Arsenal did bring in all those players. However, none of the top targets came through, with Mikhailo Mudryk going and Trossard being signed instead, and failing to land Caicedo too, and so Jorginho moved in, and kind of has a similar vibe to William, Petacek, etc. But with the situation they're in, I still think it could prove to be a shrewd acquisition. In 4th, I've gone for Forest. Forest wasted no time in trying to acclimatise to the demands of the Premier League after £150 million outlay over 23 players in the summer. While initially the gamble looked to have backfired massively, Steve Cooper has slowly but surely steered his team up the table. A double Brazilian sweep for Palmeiras duo Danilo and Scarpa added to the squad nicely. while Newcastle duo Wood and Shelvey have experienced relegation battles. Felipe from Atletico Madrid could be a cover for defensive issues, as was Keylor Neves, an incredible last-minute signing for Forest to provide cover for Henderson. In third is Bournemouth. The Cherries' 120 million takeover last month, provided optimism around the south coast, and new owners have put their money where their mouth is. Gary O'Neill has been arms with created central midfield he'd been desperate to add with Hamed Traore. Vigna also joined on loan to add to Lorient winger Al Traore and Ukraine centre-back Zambroni and West Ham goalkeeper Darren Randolph. And Bournemouth, who struggled for goals when Dominic Solanke has been missing, managed to beat Palace to Semenyo. Had they managed to keep a sweep for Zaniolo, it would have been a perfect window, but just not quite, as they did miss out on him. In second, I've gone for Leeds. If the Jesse Marsh project ultimately fails to be a success, it won't be because Leeds didn't back him in January. Max Faber was snapped up from Red Bull Salzburg, where the American links at the club proved valuable in convincing Weston McKennie to come. But most of all, the signing of Giorgio Ritter to provide cover for Patrick Bamford's injury problems was a great signing. Klitsch and Llorente were both cleared off the books, while Harrison was kept out of Leicester's clutches. The only thing missing from Leeds would have been another defensive signing to shore up their leaky back line. And finally, could it be anyone else? Chelsea. On the pitch, it's been 2 out of 10 for Chelsea, but the Blues, who are down in 10th and out of both domestic cup competitions, but a record-breaking January will go a long way to propelling them back to the top, with 600 million spent over the last 2 transfer windows. A British record £150 million deal for Benfica World Cup winner Enzo Fernandez was their 8th signings, joining Mudryk, Balashil, Felix, and Maduki Santos. Fofana and Gusto. Potter was able to see Jorginho depart, but Hakim Ziyech was unable to score a last-minute move to PSG, which is a shame for all parties, really. He will now have the unenviable task for ensuring he turns a perfect window into a good second half of the season for Chelsea, and boy oh boy do they need it. Anyway guys, that's it for the video. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, no thoughts, comments down below. Follow the show for daily football news and subscribe to my channel, scoring over greatly appreciated. Thanks very much for watching. Peace out.